Welcome and good day to people across the country to the next installment of the Better Asset Management webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about ISO 55000, a new asset management standard, and talking about the basics. My name is Robert Kaler. I am the president of Ascot Associates, and I'm pleased to be able to be your host and moderator today for this webinar. What we're going to talk about with ISO 55000 are 5 different little subject areas. We want to talk about why it matters, the facts about the standards, looking at it from a global perspective, the opportunity it presents for your organization, and resources that may help you with your adoption. I'm very pleased to have a special guest today, a world-renowned expert on asset management and ISO 55000, Mr. James Dieter. Jim, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Bob. Thanks for having me.
Can you give me a little background, just for the audience? I know your background, but give the audience a little bit of background about your involvement in asset management, and particularly the ISO 55000 standard that has been developed.
Well, I've been an operational leader and consultant in asset management for over 25 years, and the good fortune to be the U.S. head of delegation to ISO 55000, to PC 251. It was quite the opportunity and a 3-year effort.
Excellent. And now you're serving as the executive director of the Asset Leadership Network, and we'll give you a chance to talk about that a little bit later on. But just in brief, how do you see the industry and the marketplace reacting to the ISO 55000 standard as it comes out?
The buzz around asset management now in management circles is remarkable. There's been a number of events around the country around asset management. And just really a lot of rising interest. Lots of information on the internet, and a lot of interest around the standard in particular.
Excellent. Well, today we're going to try and talk a little bit about the basics. And as we look at the standard, we want to cover 5 subject areas: why it matters, the facts, the global perspective, the opportunity, and the resources. So let's start with why it matters. Jim, why would anybody be interested in the ISO 55000 standard? Why would organizations want to take a look at that?
Well, the big single word is, and if I had to repeat one word over and over again, which I've been doing, it's the word value. It's about value from assets. In the United States, we could be looked at as being a little bit behind in this, but I think that won't be the case for very long. Organizations spend a lot of time thinking about managing their money and managing their people. They don't put the same kind of effort into managing their assets. So there's a tremendous opportunity available there. And there's many ways that value can be realized. Value destruction, of course, people recognize the picture of the Deepwater Horizon, and that can be viewed almost entirely as an asset management failure. Of course, people died, not first and foremost, but there was billions of dollars of loss just of the assets, billions of dollars in cleanup costs, and beyond that, billions of dollars in lost stock value for the corporations involved. So value destruction gets a lot of attention. If it's something that dramatic, or if it's a bridge falling in the river, or a computer with Social Security numbers on it being stolen from a government employee. So that value destruction is a big factor. On the other hand, where the standard leads us is not just avoiding that value destruction, but it leads us to value creation. So there's a lot that could be talked about there, from risk management, effectiveness and efficiency, etc., up through disruptive change, really doing things in an entirely different way. And although it's a little outside the what's in the standard, there's a lot more background on this. There's a reference to this book by Chris Laszlo and Nadia Zexembeva that's a really good resource on value creation, which is where the field of asset management is headed.
Excellent. So really what we're talking about is, two sides. You're losing value because of your assets aren't taken care of, and creating value because you are managing your assets, which results in a lot more value to the organization, right?
And you seem to get a lot more attention when you're creating value than when you're or at least a lot more long-term positive attention when you're creating value rather than avoiding value destruction.
Excellent. So we're going to do that. We're going to do that for our organization. We're going to try and avoid all this value destruction, but we're going to create value. How is this standard then going to help people look at that? Talk a little bit about the standard and walk us through it a little bit, if you would.
Great. Well, first, many people are familiar with ISO management system standards. It's a really known brand across the world and in the United States. ISO has many other types of standards, and of course there's many other standards organizations like ASTM. But from a corporate perspective in the U.S., ISO management system standards are a really well-known brand. This particular standard has, as it shows, has actually 3 documents. We refer to as ISO 55000, but there's ISO 55000, 55001, and 55002. 55000 is a really useful overview document. There's some really good terms. We'll talk about a couple of those. Principles, benefits. There's words that you can use there to help understand what you can achieve, what your organization can achieve through this standard, and also materials that you could use to help others in your organization understand that. The core of the standard is ISO 55001. That's the requirements, the shall statements. This is what you're going to do. And depending on how you count them, there's about 170 of those. They're pretty high-level statements dealing with things like risk management, performance management, etc. We'll talk briefly about that. And then 55002 is some additional information, guidelines to help organizations that are implementing 55001 to achieve that, some background information and guidance. So I mentioned definitions. Definitions are really the core of any standard, and just included 2 here, but I think these are a really big deal. The definition of asset is based on value and the value to an organization. Not the depreciated cost or anything like that, the value to an organization. And my favorite is the definition of asset management. Have been involved in many discussions about having a elevator speech for asset management where you could briefly say what it is you do. And this now frames what I say when people ask me what I do for a living. I say I help organizations realize value from their assets. So I think people can understand that pretty quickly. So the 55001 and 55002 have the same structure in each document, and ultimately all the ISO management system standards will have this same exact structure. Not surprisingly, there's a standard on how to write ISO management system standard. So it goes through the organization, leadership, plans, support, operation, performance evaluation, and improvement. And there are shall statements associated with each of those. Obviously, far beyond our scope today to get into that, but that's the kind of information that you can use to help your organization realize value from the assets in your organization and from your asset portfolio as a whole.
For me, looking through reading through this 55001 and also the 55002, the thing that struck me was about the leadership, and I think that's an important point to drive home. In that the standard really calls for leadership at the executive level. Does that mean, Jim, that we think we're going to see somebody at the CX level being involved in looking at asset management?
It's hard to imagine implementing this standard without having that kind of involvement. If it's just an existing department that takes on a new responsibility, it's probably not going to have the breadth it needs to do that. There are some organizations that are already have that sort of visibility, so they'd be able to do that. And more organizations are moving to an organizational model, whether a line or matrixed organization, of having various silos of asset management reporting through a single structure. Think of your fleet asset management or your IT asset management, your real estate asset management, your personal property asset management, etc. All having a single approach at a high level on how to go about doing that.
Excellent. So global organizations, global perspectives, we've got, this international standard. It was brought together by a large group of countries, but this really does have worldwide implications, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's been a remarkable revelation to, I think, to everybody involved from around the world in developing the standard, just how much interest already existed around the world in asset management. So it's a rising management trend. I think you'll see it, stories about it in the Wall Street Journal. There's been stories about it in The Economist and in other magazines already. It makes it a great profession, many more opportunities, and it really is a management philosophy of managing your assets. Just a lot of buzz around it these days. Very big in the UK. This effort arose from a document called PAS 55 that was a UK publicly available specification on asset management, and that came about when they outsourced and privatized much of their infrastructure of their country, including rail, metro lines, water systems. And there was a need for a way to provide oversight for those. So rather than go to regulatory oversight, they went to adoption of standards and organizations following these standards. And as those are trends that we see here in the U.S. and elsewhere, it's one facet of what makes this a rising standard. And now we included this slide of the countries that were involved. A pretty remarkable group involved in it. Mentioned the UK, but Australia and the Netherlands, US were very involved from the beginning. China, France, Russia got involved as we went along, but contributions from all of those countries were critical to make this happen. And it's pretty interesting to think that there's people in all of those countries thinking about asset management and supporting the development of the standard.
Pretty impressive to think that many different organizations can get together, or the organizations representing all of those different countries can get together and come to a place where we can all agree on what asset management really needs to be.
Yeah. I should say that ANSI is, of course, the group in the United States that we worked through. They're the representative to ISO. And overall, the team working on this standard, these countries, we agreed at the beginning that we did not want to end up with the lowest common denominator document. We wanted to end up with a document that reflected the best that we could put together and the best that we could bring. And pretty sure we all think at the end of the day, we not only did that, but we have advanced the state-of-the-art of asset management with this document. So even if you're only interested in this as an asset management professional, it's probably the most important document ever written about asset management.
Well, that's a good reason for people to go out and get the documents, and I know it's publicly available now, so that people that are listening to this webcast and involved, whether they're in a leadership position or a practitioner position, can get the standards, start reading through, start understanding, how they can start adopting these best practices that have been brought together by these thought leaders around the world. So a little bit about just kind of the opportunity that it represents for people, because I think it is truly an opportunity and very much a launching point, is it not?
I think the opportunity is just remarkable. As I said earlier, organizations really haven't focused attention on managing their assets, and it's just a huge part of everybody's everybody's business. Just think of your own home and your assets. You might not think of them typically that way, but your house, your car, your computers, your furniture in your home, where would you be without those things? And for companies and other organizations, it's the same. Things don't get done without those assets. So the standard provides some of the benefits and the opportunities that you see here. Again, of course, the word value. And at the beginning, especially, earlier adopters are going to have the opportunity to differentiate your organization and realize some competitive advantage through adoption of this standard. And it's probably worth saying that there are people that adopt management system standards, and their goal is to put the banner on the outside of the building. And I guess that has its value, but organizations really are seeing the opportunity as this is a way forward on how to better manage their business, and it's an ongoing process, not a simple goal to be achieved.
So it becomes very much a dollars and cents issue for organizations. I mean, it's one thing to put it in place and say, hey, we've written this nice document inside, we'll put the banner up in front, but it goes back to that statement of value, which translates into money, right?
Absolutely. If you think of the total value of assets of an organization, whether it's a small organization with thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands to huge multinational corporations with billions and $50 billion worth of assets. And if you could save 1% of that value through these efforts, that would be worth some significant investment, depending on the size of the organization. And organizations internationally are seeing much larger benefit than that. So I think the opportunity is there in dollars and cents, and it's money to be saved and realized. Quite an opportunity.
Wow, that does look like a great opportunity for people that want to get moving forward with their organization, becoming more competitive and making a little bit more money that they can, redeploy into their organization to achieve even more competitive advantage. So for people that want to get involved in this, they can do a Google search, and there's lots of stuff, and there's going to be all kinds of talk about ISO 55000 and all kinds of companies doing it. But how are they going to really get engaged with other like-minded organizations? And that's the reason, one of the reasons that we're having this webinar today, because we want to introduce the Asset Leadership Network, and you being the executive director, it's your brainchild. This is a very unique opportunity for people to be involved in an industry group, is it not?
Oh, it really is. This really grew out of the U.S. TAG, the U.S. Technical Advisory Group. That was the group involved from the U.S. in drafting ISO 55000. And that effort was bounded by it was set up to write a standard. So now, going forward, we need a new organization so that we can continue to work together across silos and sectors and different parts of the economy. We had people that were involved in IT asset management. We had people from the energy sector. There's people in the mining sector, in the water sector, and certainly in the infrastructure sector. And there's many associations around those specific topics. But there wasn't an overarching organization, an umbrella group about asset management across the United States. And when we got it started, we had some interest from Mexico and Canada, so we've broadened it to North America. But it's a chance for those associations, asset holders, suppliers, be they manufacturers or consultants or financial accountants, etc., and standards and regulators, policy people involved in the government and standards development, a place for them to come together and advance asset management. Simply, if it's for the betterment of asset management, that's what we're about, helping all of those people succeed in what they do and helping better manage assets for our organizations and for our country. I don't think any of us want to see more Deepwater Horizons or bridges falling into rivers. It's important that we start managing our assets much better than we have.
Right, and I couldn't put any better words in place for that, especially as we look at some of the latest reports about what the infrastructure of, particularly the United States, is looking like, and kind of the percentages of assets that are out there, whether they be roads, highways, bridges, dams. The level of work that needs to be done on those, to pay attention to making sure that all of those assets are peak operating condition and serving the needs of us as citizens. So the interesting thing about the Asset Leadership Network is that this is not, an organization where me as a Joe practitioner wants to say, well, let me just pay a few dollars and I'll just become a member of this industry group. It's a little different than that, in that it's based around organizations. Can you talk to that a little bit and the advantages of that?
Yeah, it's really a trade association rather than a member association. There's member associations like the NPMA, SMRP, the Institute of Asset Management in the U.S., serving various sectors from a professional standpoint, individual professionals in various sectors and silos. What we're trying to do is bring those people together, those associations together, and advance from an organizational perspective, advance asset management and how we can be successful and bring value.
Excellent. So people that are interested in getting their organization involved, whether they're primarily asset holders, whether they're suppliers to the industry, whether they are interested in standards and some of the regulations that are out there, or they're part of an organization, they can get the information at the website that's shown there, assetleadership.net.
Yep, and it's really, we chose the word network and we chose the word leadership very specifically. It's about assets. It's about not just managing, but taking a leadership role. And the network, in the two key ways we use the word network these days, it's the interpersonal connections of the people representing these organizations and making the effort to get things done, but also the electronic network, using the web, etc. Opportunities like this of having a recording of this available to people going forward, in addition to real-time participation.
Well, just to me, it's a very unique opportunity on two fronts. One, for people to get engaged with the new standard, and also to get engaged with the network to show leadership and help their organizations really move forward. So do you want to just give us a quick highlight of the overview and summary of what we talked about, Jim?
Yeah, well, I think you got the words there really well. Number one is about value, and I don't know how anybody can walk away and say I'm not interested in that. Certainly, it's worth finding out about, whatever size organization you might be involved in. It is an ISO management system standard. There's a lot to know about that, and that carries a lot of credibility. It is a global initiative. It's just starting to balloon in the United States. Competitive advantage. I think we're all interested in that. Whatever type of organization we're involved in, effective asset management, really what it's about. And of course, we'd like you to be interested in the Asset Leadership Network, and to find out about us and how we might help you in your efforts, and connect you with resources that can help your organization to move forward.
Excellent. So for more information, we've got some information on the screen. Jim, you can be reached directly at assetleadership.net along with your phone number. And I can also be reached, and I'd be happy to pass anything along. If you want questions answered, I can get those passed along to my associates at the Asset Leadership Network. Make sure they get to Jim. So I want to thank everyone very much for attending today. This has been an installment of the Better Asset Management webinar series. There topics of importance around asset management and improving performance of your organization. Be sure to stay tuned to us as there are more on the way. Jim, once again, thank you very much for your time today. It was very informative, and I look forward to the next time.
Thanks, Bob. Great job.
All right.